Hi everyone, and welcome to the book Refuge, and welcome to a video that I literally just asked you guys to tell me what to film today, because Saturday is the best day that I have to film in the coming days, and I had no idea what to film because it's the beginning of the month and I've done all my wrap-up stuff and I, don't really have anything else to do. So I asked on my community tab, which if you don't know, once you get to a certain number of subscribers, that's when that opens for people. And I try to post something there like at least once a week, usually a poll asking you guys something, or just a fun little quirk about what's coming up or something like that. This one requested by, I put a couple ideas up there, and one of them was Kindle Unlimited recommendations. So I have a few. I'll start with kind of the non-strong romance there. I have a couple like fun fantasy ones that I want to suggest, and then leading up to the more kind of steamy recommendations, because that's what a lot of people are reading on the Kindle Unlimited. It's usually romances and, newer authors, self-published authors, things like that. If for some reason you don't know what Kindle Unlimited is, you just kind of stumbled across my video because you watch me. Kindle Unlimited is a service through Amazon where you pay $9.99 a month, or you can get a 6-month subscription of it. I just purchased a 6-month subscription for a friend, and it was like $54 for the 6 months, so you get kind of a deal if you'll do that. And you can basically rent these books from them, so it's kind of like a library on your Kindle. And there is a wide selection. Again, the ones I'm most familiar with will be kind of like the romance and like erotic romance sections on there, because that's what I'm getting from my Kindle the most, because they're books that can be really hit or miss for me. So I don't like to purchase them if I don't know, the same way that I would with like YA books or, fantasy and stuff like that, where I'm more sure that I'm going to like them. And also it's a good way to find new authors, and with a lot of self-published authors end up with their books on Kindle Unlimited, and so they usually have a pretty big backlog. So if you like an author, you can like read a whole bunch of their books, so it's really fun. But anyway, that's enough of an intro. Let's go ahead and dive into some of these. So the first one I want to talk about, I've mentioned quite a bit recently because the author reached out to me to read her book and I loved it, and so I devoured the first and second book. And she has, for sure, the first one is on Kindle Unlimited. I don't know if she has the sequel on Kindle Unlimited because she just released it, so I'm not sure. But it's called The Hunt by Aliana McPherson. I think that's how you pronounce it. Either way, it's spelt right here. This is about a girl named Melee and a boy named Gearden, and they're both in high school. And Aliana, not Aliana, that's the author, Melee, she is deaf. She's been deaf her whole life, and she used to be homeschooled, and now her family they've moved and they're putting her in public school. And her first day there, she meets this girl named Brianna, and Brianna's friend's name is Gearden, and she can actually hear Gearden talk into her mind. And she's never heard anyone speak to her before, and he can speak into her mind and hear her mind as well, which, this sounds a little Twilight in some aspects. However, I feel that Aliana took a lot of tropes that were popular a few years ago and really turned them on her head. And the themes in this that I really liked, I'm keeping these books, I'm trying to keep this all surface level since this is recommendations, but I talked much more deeply on it on my vlog a few weeks ago. I'll go ahead and link it up here if you want to know more details about this. But this has to do with magical creatures. There's wolves and vampires and druids and like fae type people and like gods and goddesses, and I loved it. And so please, if you like fantasy, or maybe I don't need to convince you, maybe you are looking for the next kind of Twilight but brought into the modern era, there's none of that like pining or the same kind of like angst that I feel like we make fun of these days. This really is a very kind of like serious story, but this was YA, but it was very intriguing. I feel like the story was built very smartly, and I read it and then I immediately asked for the sequel, which she had offered me if I liked the first one. So I got to read an e-arc of her sequel, but it just came out last week, when the sequel is called The Chase, and it picked up right where the first one left off. And now her third one, she said, should be out this spring, hopefully in the March, and that one's called The Kill. And guys, it was so much fun. They were a pretty quick read. It was really exciting. The character development's amazing. There's found family in this. There is pack dynamics. There is magic. And there's actually kind of, for the situation these people are in, there's actually kind of like a slow burn romance in it as well. No smutty bits in this at all. It was very fun and I highly recommend it. Yeah, give this new author a chance because her books, they're really fun and I'm excited to see what she does. Next on the kind of like YA, like fantasy, maybe like dystopian angle, I have Red Rider by Kate Avery Ellison. This is the first book in the Sworn Saga, of which the second book is also out, which is called Silver Wolf. And the third one, Black Veil, doesn't come out till the end of March, and I'm really upset because I love these books and they're too short. Like I wish they were longer. But Kate Avery Ellison, she has multiple series going on at once, and so, you know, she's rotating through which one she's working on. I haven't read her other series, although I really want to after reading these two. One of my best friends has like read her other series and really liked it. But Red Rider is an interesting mix of everyone says like it's kind of like The Handmaid's Tale mixed with a fantasy situation, because there are these, how do you explain it? Instead of it being like women are just oppressed, it's more that like humans are oppressed, and there are certain human women who have the gene, they have the ability, they've been marked to be able to breed with the Sworn, which are basically, they are like werewolves who have taken over society, and they're now the ruling class. Because, you know, think of it of like, you know, it's almost like we're True Blood, where like the vampires come out. In this case, it is like the werewolves took over, but they can't, like, their females can't like breed. They need human women who have been marked to have their children, basically. So we meet the main character, Red. Her name is Red Rider. And she, when she was 17, her mark appeared, and she's been hiding it for 2 years, because once you're marked, you're supposed to present yourself, and then you get taken to the capital and basically assigned to a husband there, and then you're supposed to have children for them. And she hides it, and she's working with the resistance to try to overthrow them. And everybody hates these people, but she specifically hates them because of two things. They killed her family when she was young. It was just her and her grandmother. And then they killed her, kind of, sort of, he wasn't her boyfriend because they were very young, but he was like her best friend. And it's one of those where like they would have been together later on. And he was killed when she was young too. And she believes that her mother is still alive, and so she wants to find her mother. But the starting moment of this story is that it gets discovered that she has the mark, and so this man called the Silver Wolf, he happens to be coming through her town, and so he gets personally assigned to make sure she makes it to the capital and to whoever her arranged mate will be. That's a lot to explain. I really loved this series. It's funny that this one also has to do with werewolves. I didn't realize that when I was making this list, but I read these first two last year, and I cannot wait for the third one. It is killing me that it's taking so long. These are so well written. I can't buy physical copies of her books because she doesn't have an option for it, and it makes me so sad because I want to own these ones so that I can borrow them to people. Because that's the thing, when you tell people something's on Kindle Unlimited, it just doesn't get the love that it should get, and that's one of the reasons why I like to make these videos. So, Red Rider by Kate Avery Ellison. Do yourself a favor, read it. It's really fun. Next, we are working our way into the romances now. This one I would call kind of a level 4 if you watched my video where I rank things. So I would put this one on don't share with your mother level. So level 4 for Steam. It was mostly a comedy, and it had a little sexy, but it also had a really like a lot of really drawn out parts, which I wasn't a huge fan of, but I ended up loving it overall just because of how it was pulled together. So this one is My Brother's Billionaire Best Friend by Max Monroe. And this one is actually the second in a series, which I didn't know that, but it's okay. That's how kind of all of these go, is they're usually connected, but like you can read them out of order. One second. And this one was about Maybe and Milo. So the most annoying part of this is that her name is Maybe, and that can happen in some of these romances sometimes, just books in general, where an author is trying to get too cute or like make someone's name like a hook in the story, and I'm not a huge fan of it. I actually hate it when someone's name is like used that way, because as soon as her name was Maybe, as I'm like, oh my God, there's gonna be a joke when someone says maybe, and she's like, do you mean like maybe, or do you mean me? And I'm just like, because her name is Mabel, but she goes by Maybe. And it's frustrating. But anyway, Maybe is trying to get a job in publishing, and her brother's best friend is kind of in the industry. And in this case, it's not him getting her a job at his company, but he is kind of helping her out and helps her get a job with like a different one, which was kind of a nice change. And anyway, Maybe has just like finished college, and she's living at one of her brother's buildings because her brother is a billionaire too. I get whatever, maybe not a billionaire, but he's pretty rich. But she of course wants to like do things on her own, but is it really doing it on your own if you have someone get you a job? But also, that's how life works. We need connections, we need things. But anyway, Maybe really likes Milo, and she meets this girl that he works with. It's his secretary, who she kind of starts helping him, or starts helping Maybe kind of win over Milo. And so there's lots of like text messaging in this one. There's lots of like, ah, shucks, I'm a virgin, I don't understand what these terms mean, explain them to me. There's a lot of like sexting happening, and it was cute, it was fun. And the way it kind of pulled together at the end really made me like it. And again, it wasn't a full bore, like X-rated, over the top, like a couple that we're gonna get into next. So I just wanted to have one on here that I read recently that was like in the middle, because usually the romances on Kindle for me are in that like higher tier of steam, just because I have plenty of other romances to read if I want to read something a little more chill on a day like that. So let's start getting into it then. Let's talk about Credence real quick by Penelope Douglas. Most of Penelope Douglas's books are on Kindle Unlimited. There are just a few that you'd have to purchase. Penelope Douglas is pretty well known in like the romance on Kindle Unlimited, just because her books are pretty like racy, and she was kind of the first toe I took into like bully romances and, you know, kind of like more aggressive things happening, outside of it being like a BDSM situation, because that's something totally different and really isn't as violent to me as when there's like bullying happening in a story, because bullying isn't consent on both sides. Wow, I'm really getting into a rant about this. Sorry. But there's a difference, because like bully situations, there's usually not consent on both sides for that to happen. Whereas a BDSM situation, both people know the rules and there's a lot of trust going on. And there's a big difference in that. So, but anyway, Credence, this book just came out last month by Penelope Douglas. It was kind of a surprise release. I have a full review for it. I'll link it up there. It's very steamy, very fun, but pretty dark as well. And there's actually like a lot of mental health that's dealt with in it. There is an age gap situation. There's also a threesome situation. There is also some pretty like rough, there is some bullying happen. She has all the trigger warnings in it, but I'm someone that there are very few trigger warnings that scare me away after I've been diving into more and more books in the last couple of years. And I thought it actually had some really important things to say, more so than any other ones I've read by her, in my opinion. So just want to throw that out there. A lot of her books are on Kindle Unlimited, and she's great. Next, I want to talk about Confess by A. Zavernelli, or is it Zavarelli? I can't pronounce it, but it's up here. I read this one last year as well. This is about Gypsy, who is a con woman, and Lucian, who is a lawyer. Now, this is also an age gap. This is also a forced marriage, and I'll explain how it's forced in a second. Not like forced as in whatever, but kind of like a blackmail into wedding. So Gypsy is a con woman, and her sister, it reminds me a lot of like Heartbreakers, that movie with Jennifer Love Hewitt from like the 90s or early 2000s. And Gypsy will like find out some dirt on a man, make him fall in love with her, and then when he proposes to her or like gets married to her, she will threaten to expose this secret if they won't give her some money, and then she'll leave. So she's this con woman. Well, she gets on Lucian's radar, who Lucian is kind of a gruff, grumpy guy, as well as, I mean, he's kind of a warrior for the downtrodden. And he sees what Gypsy is kind of like doing to herself and doing to her life, and that she's headed down a bad road. And so he kind of traps her, like gets a sit down with her and says, you're going to marry me and be married to me for 1 year, and you're going to do everything that I say, and I'm going to basically save you because you're headed down a bad road. And if you won't do this, if you won't marry me and live with me, then I'm going to make sure you go to prison for all the stuff that you've done because I have proof. And so it's a rough start to it because you're like, oh my gosh, what does he do with this? Okay, he means, of course, for it to be not a completely platonic situation, but he's not abusive to her. He's kind of parenting her, as well as, of course, there is some sexual things going on. But this is actually a slow burn. It reminds me a lot of like Marriage for One, which was a really good book by Ella Mays that I read last year as well. But he is even like more strict, and he actually, you know, like Marriage for One, he was indifferent to her. Lucian is like, no, you need to shape up or you're going to be in trouble. And Lucian also has a secret that he's hiding, but it's not the typical kind of secret. And this is actually a pretty like bigger age gap too, because I think he's in his early 40s. Maybe I'm wrong. It's been a long time, and she's in her early 20s. So I think it's a pretty big like age gap one too. But this was a 5-star for me. And all those things I explained, I was all very worried about all of them. And then when you're like with Lucian and you start finding out what he's doing and that he really, really cares and he's trying to save her, is amazing. There is a miscommunication trope in this one that drove me up the wall because reasons, but it also had a very satisfying conclusion to me. This also had some darker elements of there is some people coming after Gypsy because she's pissed a lot of people, rich people off by stealing money from them. So, all right, and then last I want to talk about, well, there's 2 books here. So there's this series called like the Voyeur series by Fiona Cole, and I read Voyeur last year, which was an age gap student teacher romance, and it was about this club called Voyeur where people can choose a sexual scenario that they want to watch happen, and then there are people who work there who will like do those, and you can like watch in this room and whatever. And that one was about those 2 people, the student and teacher, who both end up like, she is working there to make money and he goes to like watch a certain scenario, and then they go to school and she's his student, you know, one of those situations, in college anyway. So I really like that one. But then the next one, I came across these again. I didn't realize she had so many of them out until I was looking Fiona Cole back up, and there's 5 of these out. And so my favorite 2 were Lovers, which I'll tell you about first. So Lovers is about Jake and Jackson, and they have been friends since college, and Jackson is very out. He's a bisexual, more towards the gay side of bisexual, but as in like he's been in more relationships than men than women, but whatever, sexuality, whatever you want. And him and Jake mess around in college, and Jake was really into it, but then the pressures of his family and messing their relationship up that way just kind of just like blew everything up. And so they never, like Jake just never talked to Jackson again because he was embarrassed that he liked it and that he is straight, he's not gay, and da-da-da-da, all those things. Well, fast forward, I think it's like 8 years, and Jake is engaged to Karina, and they work with Voyeur. She does like marketing for them and all these things and whatever. They're in the business world. And Jackson becomes a partner in it too, as well as once in a while he will perform in one of the rooms because he's into that. And what happens is that Karina, we also get Karina's point of view in here. She is trying to kind of spice up their sex life. And so they go to Voyeur and they watch a situation of a menage, 2 males and a woman. And Jackson happens to be performing in that one. And because Jake already knows Jackson, they share that they knew each other. Karina invites Jackson over and asks them to have a menage together. A threesome together. And Jake is really nervous to do this because he knows he'll be really into it. He cares about Jackson. And eventually these three, like, they become like threesome buddies together. But while Jake and Jackson is willing to be in it for Jake, and Karina's willing to be in it because she thinks it's hot and it's fun, but it becomes clear that Jake and Jackson are in it for different reasons than Karina is. So this was so good. I didn't know how I would feel about the feeling of someone hiding their sexuality, because that's not something I enjoy reading about. I want people to know. I know that's not realistic, whatever, but books are fantasy to me. I didn't know how I would feel about it, but I feel like Fiona Cole, she did this in a very interesting way. And it was very sexy, but it was very raw, and it was painful, but it was really beautiful. And so I really suggest you give it a try if that sounds interesting to you. Give it a go. Then book 5 in the series. So it goes Voyeur, Lovers, Savior, Another, and Liar. And I haven't read Another yet. I read Savior, it wasn't my favorite, but I read Liar. And Liar takes place... So at the end of each book, she will have like a little chapter that sets up who the next person that it's about. And so at the end of Savior, we get a clip from Kent, who is one of the investors in the club. And he goes to watch a scenario, and there's another woman there to watch the scenario. They both end up watching it together, and they end up having some fun together while they're watching. But the woman that he's watching with, her name is Olivia, and she's only 19, and she's the niece of one of the owners, which is Kent's business partner, is her uncle. And so they're like, oh, wow, we can't see each other again. That was a mistake. And so that is like a little prequel thing that's called, I think it's called Watch With Me. And you can actually get that on Kindle Unlimited too. It's just like 30 pages. And then when Liar starts, it's been 2 years since that happened. So now Olivia is 21 and she is done with college, ready to get an internship. And her uncle brings his business partner to dinner with them. And that's Kent. And so she walks in for dinner, and the man that she hasn't been able to get out of her head is sitting right in front of her. And so this is an age gap. This is a secret relationship. This is a really like, oh my gosh, it was so sexy and so much fun. And I just loved it so much. I had such a great time. So Fiona Cole, a lot of her books have been good to me. I read a lot of her books last year, and I'm reading another one of them right now. And so I really just wanted to suggest her, specifically the Voyeur series. Voyeur was actually about someone who had some sexual trauma and was having problems like performing, and like Voyeur was the only way he could like enjoy. And that one made me cry. Like that was the professor-student one, and that professor, he made me hurt. Like he made me ache, he made me weep, and it was so beautiful. So anyway, wow, I took a long time to talk about those, but when I do my like wrap-ups or things, I feel like I don't get to talk about my favorite Kindle Unlimited as much as I want to. So that's why I wanted to do this recommendations video and just share with you kind of a spectrum of things I've been reading and ones that I would really suggest for you. And they're free if you have Kindle Unlimited. And if you don't have Kindle Unlimited, most of these books are either $2, $3, or $4 on Amazon. So that also wouldn't cost you that much if you don't have Kindle Unlimited, but I highly suggest it. Once you start reading a few of them, it just makes sense to have it. I read probably 15 to 20 Kindle Unlimited books a month, and so why not have it? It's like a waste. So thank you so much for watching. I put up new videos all the time. Make sure to subscribe and hit that bell so you're notified when I upload. Have a great day. Bye.